When I took the night shift job at mile marker 73, the woman behind the plastic pane window at the Department of Transportation kiosk pushed a clipboard toward me and said, "Read the rules twice before you sign." She had a voice that sounded like gravel tumbling in a tin pan, and eyes that didn't bother looking up as she slid the paper across. The paper was creased and greasy at the edges, like a menu at a diner you regret walking into, but eat at anyway because it's the only place open after midnight. I read the first line and smirked. I'd worked graveyards for years, gas stations on highway spurs, a truck wash that never closed, a warehouse that hummed like a beehive while the city slept. Rules were always the same. Don't steal, don't sleep, don't be weird to customers. But this one opened with, "After sunset. The rest area is not for the living alone." "No joking?" I asked, glancing over the wonky bold letters and the smudge of something like old coffee, or dried blood, but surely coffee. "Sign when you're done reading," she said. "You'll get $1 more per hour than the sign says if you follow them." I was broke. My phone bill was overdue. The transmission on my Civic whined like a mosquito trapped in a jar, and my landlord had started signing his texts with "friendly reminder," which meant something unfriendly was inbound. $1 more per hour was a blessing. Strange rules are cheap compared to eviction, so I read. I forced myself to go line by line, even the ones that sounded like bad campfire jokes. Lock. The vending machine cage by 9:07 p.m., not 9:05, not 9 to 10, 9 to 07. Bring the key back to the office and hang it on the green hook. If you are late, you must apologize to the vending machines out loud. Use their names. They are labeled. If a child asks for the mirror bathroom, escort them to the second men's room on the west side and stand outside. Do not look in the mirror while the child is inside. If you accidentally see yourself in the mirror, break eye contact with yourself immediately. Do not acknowledge your reflection if it speaks. The orange cat with the torn ear may sit on the front counter between 1:11 a.m. and 1:22 a.m. Do not pet him. Do not offer him food. If he sneezes, say "bless you" and make the sign of the cross, even if you're not religious, especially if you're not religious. The payphone rings at 2:03 a.m. Let it ring 3 times. On the third ring, pick up and listen. Do not speak unless the caller asks, "Is it safe to stop?" If they ask that, answer, "Yes, but not for you." There will be a man in a yellow raincoat on clear nights. He will ask for directions to the river. Tell him there is no river here. If he insists, step back into the light and say, "I have no map for you." The janitor closet is not a closet after 3:33 a.m. Do not open it. Do not knock. If knocking comes from inside, hum "Twinkle, twinkle, little star" until it stops. If you see lights under the stall doors when there is no one inside, go to the office, lock the door, and turn off the radio. Wait until you hear a whistle that sounds like a tea kettle. That means you can resume normal operations. At dawn, whether you see the sunrise or not, write the word "return" on the chalkboard in the break room. Wipe it off before the day shift arrives. Do not accept money from travelers after 4:04 a.m. If someone tries to hand you cash, set it on the counter, count backward from 4 to 1, and slide it back to them under your palm without breaking eye contact. If you break a rule, you will know it by the smell of cut grass and hot copper. Find the orange cat and tell him you're sorry. If you cannot find the cat, hold your breath and stand in the doorway of the mirror bathroom. Do not inhale again until the feeling passes. "Cute," I said when I finished. "Halloween stuff?" The woman finally looked up. She had a thin scar down her cheek, like someone had tried to erase a line with a dirty eraser. "It's July," she said. "Fair." I signed. My name doing that quick, fearful jitter it does when I think about rent. She slid me a key ring with 4 keys. Office, vending, janitor closet, and miscellaneous stamped on one of those cheap plastic tags. When I took them, the ring felt warmer than it should have. She must have been holding it, I told myself. Heat from her palm. Night supervisor is a misnomer, she said, already stacking papers. You'll be alone most nights. Maintenance drops by around midnight to restock the paper towels if Thomas isn't late. Don't give him any lip about the graffiti. He takes it personally. What if I can't follow the rules exactly? I asked, only half kidding. You can, she said, or you'll learn why you should. She buzzed me through the security door and handed me off to a sunset that slid down the sky like oil poured over glass. My first night as the only warm body between mile marker 72 and 74 was set to begin. The rest area was like every rest area you've ever pulled into at 2 in the morning when your eyes were sandpaper and your thoughts were all one syllable. Brick bathrooms that smell like chlorine and the ghost of cigarettes. A picnic lawn that no one uses after dark. A strip of angled parking spots where semi-trucks exhaled all night. A squat office building with fluorescence that made my skin the color of skim milk. I hung the keys on the green hook, took them off again so I could lock the vending machine cage, and checked the time. 9:03 p.m. I rolled a dolly out, mostly for the look of it, and went to the machine enclosure. We had that ugly black metal cage that slides over like a curtain and clicks into a floor latch. Security against crowbars and teenagers. On the glass, in big white decals, it said candy, drinks, chips. Under each machine, a label in peeling label maker tape named them like pets: Mrs. Bubble, Mr. Salt, Lil Crunch, and Thirsty. I checked my phone. 9:06. I wrapped my fingers around the cold bars and counted the seconds. At 9:07 exactly, I pulled the cage across. It squealed a little like a mouse caught under a door. The key fit. The lock hissed shut. Good evening, Mrs. Bubble, Mr. Salt, Lil Crunch, and Thirsty, I said under my breath, feeling ridiculous. Then I took the key back to the office, hung it on the green hook, and gave myself a mental gold star for following instructions. The office radio played some classic rock station that had apparently decided the 70s never ended. Between ads for tractor supplies and a window replacement company that replaced windows in just one day, guaranteed, I heard the whine of tires and the rumble of a truck pulling into the far lot. A family minivan slid in closer, headlights cutting across the picnic tables like 2 white knives. The air smelled of hot asphalt cooling down and pine sap, and somewhere a skunk made its rounds with slow, arrogant steps. At 10:15, a man in a Waffle House t-shirt came in to ask if we had coffee. I told him the vending machines were locked, but there was a thermos in the break room labeled office. I poured him a cup because his hands were shaking, and he said, "Just passed a wreck 30 miles back. Ambulance lights like Christmas." He accepted the styrofoam cup like it was a sacrament, and when he left, he patted the door frame twice, for luck. At 11:29, a teenager in a hoodie asked for the mirror bathroom. He was trying to be casual, but the word mirror snagged on something in his throat. You could hear it. He had a freckle constellation under his left eye that made a crooked kite shape. "You know the rules?" he asked, half-grin. "I know them," I said, pretending nonchalance I didn't fully feel. He nodded like that meant we were in a club together and padded off toward the West Side men's room with his hands in his pockets. I stood outside, watching the shadows roll under the fluorescence. I could hear a faucet run, then stop. I faced the opposite wall and studied the hairline crack from floor to ceiling that had been caulked, recaulked, and then painted over in a slightly wrong shade. In the mirror, if I looked, I would have seen my own tired face and my cheap name tag. I didn't look. When the kid came out, he looked relieved, like someone had told him the punchline of a joke he'd been scared of. "Thanks," he said. "Big mirror?" "Sure," I said, and watched him go. He got into a gray sedan idling by the curb. The driver was an older woman with sharp cheekbones. She didn't look at me. The car pulled away without the brake lights ever brightening, like a gray fish sliding into deeper water. By midnight, the humidity had loosened its grip, and night was full dark. I did the walk through, checked both bathrooms, stocked the feminine products baskets, wiped down counters, emptied trash, and jiggled the stall doors that were known to catch. There was a stall in the women's that had a little face carved into it at kid height with 2 dots for eyes and a long mouth line. Someone had written "hello" under it in pencil so faintly you could have told yourself it wasn't there. I told it hi anyway. Then the orange cat appeared. He came in like he owned the place. Through the office door I swore I'd closed, tail up like a question mark. The left ear was torn to a ragged triangle, yes, and both sides of his cheeks had those tomcat jowls that puff out like he'd been in too many fights. His eyes were the yellow of wet leaves. He didn't touch me. He went straight for the counter, jumped, and arranged himself like a loaf of bread, paws tucked and tail wrapped, glancing at me to see if I'd challenge the arrangement. I checked the clock, 1:12 a.m. It made my heart do a small, ridiculous skip, to see the time in line with the rule like a train arriving on the minute. He sneezed. It was small, unexpectedly dainty. I said, "Bless you," and made the sign of the cross with my right hand, which made a muscle in my wrist twitch because it had been a long time since I'd done that. I was baptized Catholic, but my attendance faded with my mom's patience. I wasn't sure I was doing it right. The cat blinked slow approval, or tolerance, and proceeded to gaze out the office window like someone watching a very boring play. At 1:22, he stood. He stepped on the keypad of the ancient register, making it beep a protest. He flicked his tail once against my forearm like a reprimand, hopped down, and disappeared into the hallway with the decisiveness of someone heading to a room they use every night. I told myself I was adjusting. That was the word I used as I straightened the brochure rack, smoothing pamphlets for cave tours, zip lines, and a world's largest ball of twine, 2 exits north. I was adjusting to the idea that the night shift rules were weird because weird things happened here, and maybe naming the vending machines kept the midnight from turning into a mouth that swallowed you, like a superstition you do or don't believe in, but which shapes your steps anyway. You don't whistle in the graveyard. You don't look in the mirror while a kid uses the second men's room. You let the payphone ring 3 times. When it did, the sound rattled through the tiles like a maraca full of bees. 2:03 a.m. Exactly, my phone screen said. I let it ring twice. On the 3rd ring, I picked up and put the receiver to my ear. No dial tone, no hum, just space. The first breath I heard was not human. It wasn't inhuman exactly either. It was a deep rush, like wind under a bridge in winter, steady and unhurried. I didn't speak. I listened. The receiver smelled faintly of coins. Then, like someone turning up the volume on a television across the street, I heard tires on gravel. Then a voice, far away and close at the same time. "Hello? Hello, can you hear me?" The voice was a man's, maybe 25, with a burr in it like he'd been yelling. I held the phone and fought the impulse to answer. The rule was clear: do not speak unless he asked the question. My tongue pressed against my teeth. He started, then stopped. I heard him breathe. "Is it safe to stop?" The answer was in my mouth like a pebble. "Yes," I said. Then my brain barked at me. "But not for you." "Yes, but not for you." There was a pause. "The kind that has fingernails." Then, over the line, I heard a slow, wet sound, like the tide drawing back over rocks. A second voice entered, too close to the first, but not speaking. When the line went dead, I rested the receiver back in its cradle. My hand shook. The office clock ticked. The fluorescent hummed an A-flat that made my molars ache. I wrote down the time in the logbook, because that's what the previous night supervisor had done. Tiny, neat handwriting like a schoolteacher's. 2:03 payphone as expected. Caller asked the question. Answer given. The line after that in their cramped script read, "Remember to mop under the bench by the west door. Soda spill." I mopped. When in doubt, mop. The floor gave off that lemon-cleaned smell that is less lemon than chemical pretending to be lemon. My mind tried to go places I did not let it. Like a dog bullying the end of a leash. I kept it here. I kept it on the tile. The swings of the mop head. The rhythm of rinse and wring. The small satisfaction of brown water going cloudy, then clear. At 2:47, someone knocked on the office door. A polite 3-tap knock. I opened it because I'm not smart all the time, and because it was my job, and because the night expects you to do what you do in daylight. He wore a yellow raincoat. The sky was empty of clouds, and the air smelled like road and pine and nothing else. He had the hood up, which should have made his face shadowed. It wasn't. It was only unremarkable, which was worse. The kind of face you forget as soon as you turn away. Not because there's nothing there, but because it's been seen everywhere. He smiled. It was practiced. "Sorry to trouble you," he said. "Could you tell me where the river is?" My mouth was dry. The rule was a bright line across my brain. "Tell him there is no river here." "There's no river here," I said. He blinked, slow, as if my words had to travel an extra distance to arrive. "I saw the sign," he said conversationally. "Water access." He turned his head as if surveying the night, listening for it. "I know it's near." I stepped back just a little, making sure my shoulder blades found the light. "I have no map for you," I said. For a moment, the practiced smile loosened. Something underneath it shifted, like muscles rolling in a big animal's back. Then he nodded, as if I'd done him a small favor. "No map," he repeated as if tasting the words. "All right, I'll find my own way." He turned and walked toward the picnic area. He held his hands loosely at his sides, palms angled forward. He had no flashlight. The trucks idled beyond, big sleeping animals expelling low sighs. I watched the yellow coat become a smudge, then a suggestion, then nothing. When I waited to hear footsteps, I heard something else. Like the sound a paper bag makes when you fold it slowly. Like leaves turning over without wind. I closed the office door and locked it. The bolt thudded with a satisfying mortal sound. At 3:10, the maintenance guy, Thomas, came in wheeling a cart with replacement paper towel rolls stacked like wedding cakes in plastic. He had a key of his own that chattered when he turned it. He was a big man with a small voice, beard flecked with gray, and a tattoo on his forearm of a rooster smoking a cigarette. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You're new," he said. He opened the women's bathroom door and propped it with the plastic wedge on his cart. "What's your name again?" "Eli," I said. "Nice to meet you." "You read the rules?" he asked without looking at me. "Yeah," I said. "Do you take them seriously?" He made a sound that wasn't a laugh and wasn't not. "I take my job seriously. You take yours." He replaced the soap in the men's room dispenser with mechanical little clicks. "Don't try to outsmart them. They don't care." "Who's they?" I asked. He gave me a glance over his shoulder that said he didn't mind me asking, and also wouldn't answer. "The folks who pay me," he said instead, head tilt toward the ceiling. "And the others." He left at 3:29. He always left before the hour, he told me, on account of the closet. "Don't try to clean between 3:30 and 4, he said. "Nothing gets clean then anyway." At 3:33 a.m., the janitor closet became not a closet. That's how my brain labeled it. capital letters, once the first knocking started. It was small, apologetic at first, like someone unsure of the etiquette for asking to be let out of somewhere they shouldn't be. The knock had a hollow quality that suggested no knuckles were involved. My spine went ice cold. I remembered the rule like a prayer: do not open it. Do not knock. If knocking comes from inside, hum "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" until it stops. I didn't want to. That nursery song had the specific taste of childhood embarrassment. I hummed anyway. My hum sounded tinny in the tiled air. The knocking paused, as if listening, then resumed in a pattern that matched the rhythm of my humming but lagging a half beat. I hummed louder, the melody stumbling in my throat as the knock kept pace. I walked away from the closet and into the office, sat in my chair, and hummed until my chest hurt. Eventually, as promised, the knocking stopped. I kept humming 2 beats longer just in case. And in those 2 beats, something like breath came under the door, pressing against the crack. A smell like wet leaves left in a bucket. It receded on my very last note. I wastefully inhaled, feeling each ounce of air arrive like a delayed train. At 3:40, I nearly broke a rule. A man came in with a busted nose and a hand towel pressed against it. Blood had soaked through and made a Rorschach that could have been a butterfly or a bat. He was young, maybe a college kid, wearing a t-shirt for a university I'd never heard of with the name of their team. Something with claws, peeling off from too many washes. He moved like someone braced for something more than pain. "You got a first aid kit?" he asked, thick and jammed from the swelling. He sniffed and then winced. "Bathroom's got one," I said, coming around the counter. "Sit here. Tilt your head forward a little, not back." He sat on the bench by the west door. I got the kit and handed him gauze, an ice pack you smack to activate, antiseptic wipes. He did what I told him with the automatic trust of someone whose fight has been used up somewhere between mile markers. When the bleeding slowed, I noticed something that made the back of my neck pinch. His shadow on the tile was half a step behind his body, like it had been caught in a different part of the room and had to catch up. When he moved his hand, his shadow followed a hair late. "You get in an accident?" I asked gently. "Some guy," he said, eyes on his lap. I don't know. I pulled over to look at the map on my phone and he swallowed. He looked up at me, and in that look I felt an undertow. "He asked me if it was safe to stop," he said. "Weird, right?" He gave a shaky laugh that wanted to cover panic with bravado and couldn't. I went colder. "The payphone." The answer: "Yes, but not for you." "What did you tell him?" I asked, my voice very steady. I said, yeah? Like, sure, whatever." He laughed without his teeth. "You know what I mean? Like it didn't reach his mouth." He pressed the ice pack harder to his nose. "Then I got back in my car and drove here. I think he followed me for a bit, but..." He made a small, helpless gesture with his free hand, and his shadow didn't match it. "I guess not," I nodded. I wanted to say 100 things. I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to tell him to stay. The rule book in my head turned pages like wind through a catalog. Nothing said what to do about this. "It's almost 4, I said, checking the wall clock. "Where are you headed?" "Home," he said. I didn't know where that was for him. His eyes didn't know either. He reached into his pocket with his left hand. His shadow's left hand lagged, and pulled out a crumpled bill, a 20. He held it out toward me with automatic kindness. "Thanks, man. For the supplies. I appreciate it." 4 a.m. was not yet here. It was 3:58, but I could feel the weight of the rule about money like a coin under my tongue. Do not accept money from travelers after 4:04 a.m. It was before, but the rule's edges felt slippery, like a border that had started moving when I wasn't looking. "I didn't take the bill. You'll need that for gas," I said. "Just go home. Get some sleep." Go when the sun is up." He looked like he wanted to argue. He didn't. He stood, a little wobbly. "Okay," he said. He hesitated, then stuck the 20 back into his pocket. "Do you—" he began, and I knew what he would ask. "Is it safe to stop?" "Don't stop," I said, voice cutting faster than his question could form. "If you get tired, pull into a supermarket lot with cameras and lights. Don't stop for anyone. Don't open your window if someone knocks." He stared at me, and for a moment the lag disappeared. His shadow was his. "Okay," he said. He left. His car started with the desperate cough of an engine that has been asked to forgive much and keeps forgiving. He drove away. I watched the taillights thread out, then vanish. At 4:04 a.m. precisely, a woman walked in with a jar of coins. Not a jar. A mason jar with a rusty lid, full of quarters and nickels and little silvery discs I didn't recognize. She wore a dress that might have been white once, and her hair was in a braid down her back, tied with a ribbon that might have been red. "I need change," she said. "For the machine." She tapped the jar like it was a baby she wanted to burp. "I want chips." The machines were locked. The rule in my brain said, "Don't accept money. Count backward from 4 to 1 and slide it back without breaking eye contact." But she hadn't handed anything to me. She only held the jar like someone holding a kitten wrong. "I can't take money," I said, focusing on her face. Her eyes were dark, and somewhere behind them something else watched me. Not curious, just present. "The machines are closed for the night." Her smile made a rusty sound. "Closed," she repeated. "That's fine. I'll wait." "You can't," I said before I could stop myself. "We close. We don't reopen." My heart banged against my ribs like a locked bathroom door someone was pushing on. I adjusted. "Till morning. Business hours." The office clock did its slow, stupid tick. She set the jar on the counter with a clink, like a dropped glass marble. The coins inside shifted. The topmost one rolled against the glass, and on it I saw a tiny shape I didn't recognize. A bird with too many wings. "I've been waiting a long time," she said. "I'm good at it." I counted backward. 4, 3, 2, 1. I slid the jar toward her with my palm over the lid, never breaking eye contact. Her eyes were bottomless. The jar moved an inch, then 2, then back over the invisible line between mine and hers. "Please take it," I said, not sure who I was speaking to. "Please." She tilted her head, as if listening to something on the ceiling. A truck engine turned over outside. The night held its breath, too. She picked up the jar. The coins made that C sound again, small, lonely. "I'll come back," she said. "Please don't," I said, and then wished I hadn't. She smiled like a photo of a smile left in the sun too long. She turned and walked away. Her shoes made no sound. The jar did. Outside, she didn't get into a car. There was no car. She went toward the picnic area where the man in the yellow raincoat had gone. The air smelled momentarily of cut grass and hot copper, and panic filled my nose and mouth. I looked for the orange cat. He was not on the counter. He was not on the floor. I didn't find him. The panic rose to a ridiculous crest and hung there. A wave frozen in the act of breaking. Hold your breath and stand in the doorway of the mirror bathroom. I went. It felt like walking into a cold draft that had had time to memorize the shape of my body. The second men's room on the west side had its light on, and no one inside. I stood in the doorway and drew in a lungful like a diver. The mirror over the sinks reflected the empty room back at me, and in that reflection the stalls were closed. All of them. Though in the real room 2 stood open. My chest started to burn by the time the first stall door in the reflection clicked, and a blue air seeped out under it like dry ice fog. I didn't inhale. My eyes watered. The stall in the reflection opened with the patient slowness of a book being opened by someone who knows how the story ends. The smell of metal and grass filled my head so thoroughly I tasted it. Then, suddenly, like a joke told badly and ending without a punchline, the feeling passed. I gulped in air that tasted like tile cleaner and dust. The mirror showed me again, just me, and behind me the stalls were what they were. One open, one closed, one with a broken latch that stayed broken no matter how many times Thomas replaced the screws. Back in the office, dawn was a suggestion at the far lip of the world. The trucks idled with new rhythm. Birds I didn't know the names of started a bored chorus. I went to the break room and wrote "Return" on the chalkboard in handwriting that didn't look like mine. It looked like the woman from the kiosks. Or maybe the person before her. Or maybe the first person who'd ever worked here. When the highway was 2 lanes and people still said service station. As soon as I wrote it, I erased it. Dust ghosted the air. I felt that thin vibration you get when something is done the way it has been done 1,000 times, and your small act clicks into the groove and becomes not yours alone. The day shift guy, Carlos, came in at 6:02, rubbing sleep out of his eyes and balancing a paper tray of coffees with his elbow. He looked me over the way night people look at each other to see if a piece is missing. "How was it?" he asked. He handed me a cup without asking how I take it. The lid said M on it for medium. He's the kind of person who always gets the same thing. "Quiet," I said, the word not meaning exactly what it usually means. "Your cat's a jerk," Carlos smiled. "Yeah," he said. "He keeps the bats out of the vents." He set his coffee down and stretched. He had a tattoo too on his wrist. A little road, a line with dashes. "You get the call?" I nodded. "I did." I didn't ask how he knew. "Do you ever—" I started and then stopped, because you can ask questions that change the shape of your mouth, and then the sounds that come out afterward never go back to normal. "Just lock up the vending machine key," he said. He said it kindly. He said it like a suggestion. "Bring it home if you forget. Don't leave it off the green hook. That's bad luck." I went out to the parking lot. The sunlight had the particular cheap gold of early morning, like the world had dressed itself in something flashy for a laugh. The Civic started reluctantly, but started. On the highway, I drove past the place where the man said he'd seen the wreck, but the lane was clean. No glass glitter, no black skid gestures on the asphalt. A family in a Subaru passed me, and the kids in the back played a game with their hands I didn't recognize. When I got home, I slept like the dead and woke up feeling alive, which is always a suspicious reversal. Night 2, I went in thinking I'd be less spooked because I knew what to expect. That's like saying you'll be less afraid of the ocean the second time because you know there are waves. The ocean doesn't care what you know. It only cares that you're in it. The woman at the kiosk wasn't there, or maybe she was, and I didn't recognize her behind the glass because it reflected the sunrise and made the world look like a cheap postcard. The office smelled like coffee and lemons. The cat's hair clung to the counter. Someone had left a note that said, "Remember to jiggle the men's 3rd stall latch, get stuck," and signed it with a doodle of a face with X's for eyes. It made me smile in a way that wasn't entirely pleasant. At 9:07, the cage slid closed over the vending machines. "Good evening, Mrs. Bubble, Mr. Salt, Lil Crunch, thirsty," I said, like someone who had gotten in the habit of talking to things. "Sleep tight." At 10:01, a convoy of 3 trucks pulled in. Flatbeds with tarps that made their loads look like sleeping whales. The drivers used the bathrooms, nodded politely, and left without words, like they'd been reminded to keep their voices low around something that might be listening. At 11:17, a girl with a plastic tiara and sparkly shoes skipped past the office and then came back, hesitant. "Excuse me," she said, breathless. Like running had taught her politeness could coexist with urgency. "Do you have the mirror bathroom?" She pronounced mirror very carefully. I escorted her, stood outside, stared at the wall crack. A mosquito whined near my ear and then, as if it had discovered something distasteful about me, moved away. When the girl came out, she held a paper towel like a bouquet. "I saw a lady in the mirror," she said. She was brushing her hair. "You didn't talk to her?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "No," she said. "She didn't talk to me either. She didn't see me." She thought about that. She was sad. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Her father waited near the door, flipping his car key in a circle on his finger like you do when you are trying to look casual and end up fidgety. He looked at me briefly, searching for something, maybe for the way I would confirm the world was regular. I gave him the best regular face I had and wished them a safe trip. The girl curtsied. She actually curtsied. Kids are like that sometimes. They reset the rules of behavior because they can. At 12:23, Thomas came earlier than the night before. "Schedule's weird," he said, stacking toilet paper into the locked cages under the sinks. "They moved my other stop." "Who's they?" I tried again, less casually. He handed me a pair of rubber gloves without explanation. "They were too big." He didn't answer. He whistled a tune that wasn't anything I knew, but which made my stomach feel warm from the inside, like soup. When he left, the office felt larger than it had at the same time the night before. The corners had more depth, as if you could fall into them if you walked carelessly. The cat didn't appear until 1:13. He jumped up on the counter with more effort than yesterday. I said, "Bless you," preemptively, which made me feel stupid. And then he sneezed, because the world likes to make fools of us with kindness sometimes. At 2:03, the phone rang. 3 rings. I picked up. This time I recognized the gravel and the faraway sound. My grip on the receiver was surer. "Hello?" the man asked. The question in his voice was raw around the edges. "Is it safe to stop?" I closed my eyes. I knew the answer to give. "Yes," I said. And as the words hit the air, I felt the other words waiting like a shadow behind a door. "But not for you." I said them. The line made that tide over rock sound again. The hair on my arms climbed their tiny ladders and kept climbing. I hung up. My hand left sweat on the phone. The man in the yellow raincoat didn't come that night. The closet didn't knock. Instead, sometime after 3, the lights under the stall doors flicked on without anyone being inside. I saw it from the office because the bathroom angles make it like a little stage. And I went cold in the way you go cold when you know the timing of something isn't yours to control. I walked to the office, locked the door, turned off the radio. The silence made a kind of pressure, like altitude. I waited. That's all the rules said I had to do. Wait until you hear a whistle that sounds like a tea kettle. The sound came, soft, then building. Not from the pipes, not from the ceiling, not from anywhere I could point to. When it reached the point where you'd expect steam to burst from a spout, it stopped. The lights under the stalls went dark. When I turned the radio back on, a weather report talked about thunderstorms that would not arrive until Thursday, and I pictured raincoats drying on hooks like limp yellow tongues. At 4:04, no one brought me money. I felt relieved in a guilty way, like I'd cheated by not having to face a test. Dawn crawled in. I wrote return on the chalkboard and wiped it away. I drove home as the sky put on its daily bravery and cars filled the eastbound lanes with sleepy determination. I slept. I dreamed of water where there was none, of a river running through the break room, of the orange cat walking atop it like a floating bridge. On the 3rd night, the rules became mine. You don't plan that kind of surrender. It just happens shyly. While you're wiping fingerprints off a glass door with Windex that smells like wintergreen, and the clock says 1:04, and the orange cat lifts its head like he's heard your thoughts. It happens when a woman comes in crying at 11:52 because her GPS led her to the wrong exit, and she's late for a job she can't afford to lose. And you print out a map from the slow office computer and draw a line in pink highlighter. And when you hand it to her, she looks at you with the kind of gratitude that is almost violent in its relief. It happens when a trucker tells you his wife had their baby last week, and you say, "Congratulations," and he pulls out his phone and shows you a photo of a face so new it barely looks like a person. And you say, without irony, "She's perfect, even if all babies look like angry raisins." The rules thread through those human moments because they run on a related electricity. If you respect the rituals, the people make sense. If you respect the people, the rituals take on a shape that feels less like superstition and more like scaffolding. But there are still the other parts. At 2:03, the call came from a payphone that hadn't been connected since 1997, according to a little plaque inside the booth that I'd never noticed before. The plaque was metal and worn, and when I touched it, a residue like graphite came off on my thumb. A man on the line asked, "Is it safe to stop?" "Yes," I said, because that was how the line began. "But not for you," because that was how it continued. "Not for me," the man repeated, like a sad kid repeating the teacher's directions without understanding them. I heard footsteps behind him, too many for one person. I hung up. I wrote it in the log. The night kept going. At 3:33, the janitor closet knocked in a new pattern. It tapped, then slided its sound along the door frame like something peeling an orange too carefully. I hummed, "Twinkle, twinkle," and then, because the knocking didn't stop, I whistled. I am not a good whistler. The sound came thin with spit. The knocking quieted. The orange cat watched me from the break room table, eyes narrowed to slits, judging my technique. At 4:04, a man tried to hand me a 20, and I counted backward and slid it back. And he said, "I insist." And I said, "I can't." And he said, "You people never can," which would have been insulting if it hadn't been sad. And when he left, the bill wasn't a bill anymore. It was a strip of paper from a fortune cookie that said, "Your path will cross with a stranger." I stuck it in the logbook with a paperclip, because it felt like documentation. By the fourth night, I wanted to ask the orange cat his name, not the label we'd been given for him, but his name. I didn't, because there wasn't a rule for that, and around here you don't add rules. You obey the ones that arrive. The fourth night is when I broke one. I didn't mean to. Breaking the rules is never, in my experience, an act of rebellion in places like this. It's an act of clumsy human softness. It was 2:40. A woman in a motel uniform came in and bought nothing because there was nothing to buy with the machines locked. She looked tired in a way that might never go away, like her bones had decided to be tired on a molecular level. Her hair was pulled back so tightly the skin by her temples looked polished. "I need to call a ride," she said. "My ride left." She said it like left was a synonym for died. "The payphone," I started, then stopped, because the payphone wasn't connected. "Do you have a phone?" "It's dead," she said, holding up a brick of black glass that might have once been a phone. "I got off early because I cleaned 64 rooms today. No tips?" She looked like if she stopped talking, she might start crying. "Someone pushed the ice machine and it broke, and so I had to scoop it out with a cup for 3 hours, and my hands are—" She stopped. She looked at her hands like they belonged to a stranger. "Cold." "Here," I said, and handed her the office phone. The line was for weather reports and DOT stuff. It could call out. The rule didn't say anything about letting a woman call her ride at 2:40 a.m. The rule said to let the payphone ring at 2:03 and not to talk unless the caller asked the question. This was not that. She dialed. The line rang. She listened, her face in profile like a coin, old Roman. She smiled a tiny smile when someone picked up on the other end.
"Hi,"
she said, voice wobbling.
"can you come get me, please?"
I went to the break room to give her privacy. The chalkboard looked naked without return on it. The orange cat had words in his eyes I couldn't read. When I came back to the office, she was hanging up, relief rearranging her features into something more spacious. "Thank you," she said. "He's coming." I nodded. At 3, she waited on the bench by the west door. At 3:15, she looked at the clock like she could push its hands with willpower. At 3:31, the closet knocked. I hummed automatically. She looked at me, eyebrows up. I lifted a hand like a traffic cop, "Not now," and hummed louder. The knocking stopped. She laughed, then covered her mouth like she'd said something rude. By 3:50, no one had arrived.
"Maybe he fell asleep," I said.
It came out too cheerful. "Do you want to wait in the office? It's warmer." "No," she said. "No offense. I like to see the cars." At 4:04, a sedan pulled in, lights off. It cut across the painted lines like it didn't care about the directions we give ourselves to feel civilized. It parked without parking. A man got out. He wore a yellow raincoat. The sky was clear and a shy light touched the eastern trees. He walked toward the bench. He raised a hand and waved in a way that pressed the air wrong. "It's okay," the woman said, standing. "He's here." She didn't see what I saw. Or she saw something else. Or the shape of him was different from where she sat. She started to step forward. Time stuttered around my heartbeat. "Wait," I said. Too loud. The man in the raincoat turned his face toward me. It was not unremarkable. It was blurry, like a photo taken with a greasy lens. My tongue found no words. The rule: tell him there is no river here. That applied when he asked. He hadn't asked. The money rule whispered that after 4:04, you don't accept what's offered. What was he offering? A ride, a way home, an ending that could be labeled and stored in the bin with the other endings. Is it safe to stop? The man in the raincoat asked. He asked it like a courtesy. He asked it as if he already knew the answer and wanted to see if I would be brave enough to say it. He took another step. "Yes," I said, "because the line starts that way. But not for you," I finished, and knew it wasn't to him I spoke. The woman froze. A breath caught and suspended in her. The man's face did that smooth jaw shift. He turned his attention to me in full. The air went colder. The office fluorescent hummed up a note, maybe a half step. He took another step toward me, ignoring the woman, and as he did, I realized I was now back toward the mirror bathroom. The door stood open like a mouth. "Not for me," he repeated, amused. "Then for who?" My heel found the tile threshold of the bathroom. The mirror showed me the hall, the office door, the man in the yellow raincoat. Only in the mirror he wasn't wearing a coat. In the mirror he wore something like water that clung to his shoulders. He looked damp the way a shadow looks damp. He smiled. The smile was realer in the mirror. "For anyone else," I said, and stepped into the bathroom because it was the only light, and the light felt safer than the dark, even if that was a lie. I didn't look in the mirror. That was not a rule now, only if a child was inside. But rules don't like to be approximated. The woman sat back down, hands clasped like a kid on a bus. The man followed me to the doorway. He did not cross the threshold. He looked at the line of tile where the hall met the bathroom and widened his smile like someone admiring a clever fence. "Ah," he said, as if I'd done something interesting. He tapped his forefinger against the doorframe once, twice. "I don't need a map after all." "Leave," I said. And it was not a brave word, but I said it with my voice that had stayed with me through rent increases and cracked axles and calls I didn't want to pick up. "You can't come in here." He blinked, and the space around my head thickened, like the air had been poured into a different shape and I was inside it. Then he stepped back, and the pressure lessened. He turned to the woman on the bench and tilted his head. "I can take you home," he said. He had a good voice for lying. It had sincere edges. "I'm waiting for my cousin," she said. "He's coming." She looked at me like maybe I had a cousin in my pocket. I shook my head minutely because it is important to never lie in certain kinds of conversations. "You'll wait a long time," he said cheerfully, and then he walked away, his shoes making the sound of rain that wasn't there. He got into his car and sat. He didn't turn it on. The car sat, a dark box, and the woman's breath for a minute turned visible, white thread in the air. It wasn't cold enough for that. She didn't seem to notice. My skin prickled like someone had picked up the night and shook it to see what fell out. At 4:20, a different car arrived, a beat-up pickup with a ladder strapped to the top and a dent in the rear where someone had backed into something more stubborn than they were. A man got out. He had the same mouth as the woman. He waved. His face was tired in a way that didn't try to hide it. He took her hands and said, "I'm sorry, I fell asleep." And she said, "It's okay." And he said, "No, it isn't." And she said, "But it is now." And I looked at the sedan with the raincoat man. It was empty. It had been empty. Maybe it had always been empty. They left. The sun pushed on the darkness like a heavy door. I wrote return on the chalkboard and erased it. But the chalk dust smeared into a shape that looked like water sliding downhill. I wiped it again with a wet paper towel until it looked like nothing at all. The fifth night, I brought in a thermos of coffee that tasted like burnt toast and betrayal, because the office coffee had begun to taste like pennies, and I doubted the water lines were entirely ours. The cat inspected the thermos and then yawned, revealing a pink mouth and the inevitability of teeth. The phone rang and I said the words. A trucker fell asleep in his cab in the lot, and his snore became part of the rhythm of the night. The closet knocked and I hummed, and the humming turned into singing without my permission. And I let it, quietly, a lullaby to something I didn't want to see. The sixth night, a child in footy pajamas asked for the mirror bathroom. I escorted her. She stood on the tips of her toes to look in the mirror and whispered, "She looks tired." And I said, "Maybe she'll rest." And the kid nodded like this was fairness. The seventh night, the vending machine cage stuck at 9:07. It didn't want to close. I wrestled with it and felt the hot prickle of being watched, not by someone but by something like clock hands that had grown eyes. I swore and apologized to Mrs. Bubble out loud, which I felt stupid about until the cage slid, catching the lock with a click that sounded relieved. "Sorry," I said, and hung the key on the green hook. I turned around to find the orange cat staring at me with pupils like black raisins gone wider. He sneezed. I blessed him. He blinked a "you are forgiven" that may have been a "you are observed." The eighth night. There was no eighth night. I mean, there was, but it was the kind you find in books where the author knows the reader can only take so much strange breakfast, and so they write something like, "A week passed uneventfully." And by uneventfully, they mean that many small events happened, and no one died, and no one was revealed to be a ghost. And the rules were followed, and in following them, the world remained itself. Until the ninth. On the ninth night, the payphone rang at 2:02. I looked at the wall clock and thought it wrong. I looked at my phone and it said 2022. The phone rang once, twice. If it rang a third time, I should pick up. I held my breath in a way that had nothing to do with the mirror bathroom. The third ring came and I picked up, because rules do not care about your fear, they care about your obedience. "Is it safe to stop?" the voice asked, fast, urgent, overlapping the click of my lifting the receiver. It was a woman's voice this time, young, like a coin that had just been minted. "Yes," I said. The word sat cold on my tongue. "But not for you." She made a sound that broke something small inside my chest. "Okay," she said very softly, The way people say okay when they agree to something they should not have to agree to. Okay. I heard the sound of gravel. I heard wind. I heard the tide. I hung up. I stepped outside and the air was different. It had that high, dry feeling you get before lightning, when the hair on your arms tries to announce weather. The highway was a black ribbon with headlights threaded on it like moving stars. The picnic tables sat like obstinate cows. The vending machines sat caged and dreaming of candy. The bathrooms were empty in the right way. Then the mirror bathroom light flicked on. I didn't go. The rule didn't say to go. It said what to do if the lights under the stalls turned on when no one was inside. These were overhead lights. I stood in the office doorway, letting the door hold me up with its mere existence, and watched the light glow like a lantern in fog. Someone stood inside, in the mirror. Not in the bathroom, in the mirror. She combed her hair with a slow, patient motion. The comb was bone white. Her hair was dark. She didn't look up. The combing continued, as if a song had to be finished, or a story had to end on the right page. I did not move. The orange cat slid between my legs and sat, perfectly still, like a sphinx that had gotten bored of riddles and decided to keep them to himself forever. After a time, the lights went out. The bathroom returned to being a bathroom. The night returned to being night. The cat left my ankle. My breath turned warm. The rules waited on their little hooks for the next hour to ask of them what it would. Dawn rolled up like a new rug. I wrote return and erased it. Carlos came in with coffee and a story about a deer that had jumped in front of his car and then changed its mind. I drove home and slept. You want me to tell you why I'm still there? You want me to tell you why I go back? I go back because the rules are strange, but the world is stranger without them. I go back because when a family pulls in, and a kid holds a plastic dinosaur so tight, the head pops off, and you produce a strip of duct tape like a magician, pulling a scarf out of a sleeve. You are the kind of person who makes things stay together for 5 more miles. And sometimes 5 miles are the difference between okay and not okay. I go back because when a woman asks for the mirror bathroom, I know to stand outside and not look in the mirror, and this way maybe she gets to do what she has to do without another thing breaking in a life that has too many broken things. I go back because the cat sneezes, because I say bless you, because he listens. I go back because the man in the yellow raincoat does not always get to be the last word, because the janitor closet knocks and I hum, and something that wants my attention doesn't get it. And that is a small, satisfying power. I go back because the vending machines have names, and I like to think maybe one night they will tell me theirs, and not the ones in peeling label tape. I go back because one morning, at 5:59, while the sky was negotiating its light and the world smelled like wet pavement and coffee breath, the payphone rang and it was my mother's voice on the line. Even though her number had been off for 2 years, and she said, "Is it safe to stop?" And I said, "Yes, but not for you." And I hung up and cried in the break room until my nose ran and the cat sat on my shoulder like a parrot, heavy and forgiving. And then I wiped my face and wrote return on the board, and erased it, and went home. On the 10th night, and the 11th, and the 12th, the rules continued. They always will, I think. That's their gift, and their curse. And mine is that I will too, but this isn't the end. There's the night when the mirror speaks my name, and the time I have to apologize to Mr. Salt for being late, and he answers with a jitter of the coils and a candy bar that drops without money. And the way the word return, when written in the light before day, looks like return if you squint. Like maybe I should return something I turned once, and that will make it right. There's the night the roof pops with a sound like knuckle cracking, and the closet doesn't knock, but breathes, slow. And I have to sing an old hymn my grandmother used to sing while she peeled potatoes, and the breath pulls back like a tide listening to music. There's the night a stranger comes in and sits at the bench and asks me if I've seen his wife. And he describes a woman who combs her hair in mirrors. And I have to decide if telling the truth is the same as breaking a rule. There's the night. Well, you'll want to hear about that. You'll want to know what I did. You'll want to know if it worked.